In The Trouble with Nigeria, Chinua Achebe diagnoses the root causes of Nigeria's persistent social and political dysfunction. The book, written in Achebe's clear, direct prose, reflects his disappointment with Nigeria's post-independence trajectory and his belief that moral and visionary leadership is essential for national progress. Achebe's central argument is encapsulated in the opening sentence. The trouble with Nigeria is simply and squarely a failure of leadership. From this premise, he goes on to examine how Nigeria's political, cultural, and social ills stem from this core issue, and he proposes a vision for how things could change, if only the right leadership emerged. Achebe divides the book into 10 short chapters. 1. The problem of leadership. Achebe argues that Nigeria is not inherently doomed or cursed with misfortune. It has intelligent, talented people and abundant resources. What it lacks, he says, is leaders who are committed to the public good rather than to personal gain, ethnic loyalty, or corruption. He critiques the culture of self-interest and opportunism among Nigerian leaders and accuses them of lacking vision, discipline, and patriotism. For Achebe, leadership is not about power or position, but about service, integrity, and example. 2. Tribalism. Achebe identifies tribalism, ethnic chauvinism, as a major barrier to national unity and development. He criticizes politicians who exploit ethnic divisions for political gain, and he laments how many Nigerians prioritize ethnic loyalty over national identity. He insists that tribalism is not inevitable, but is nurtured by leaders who benefit from disunity. He calls for merit-based appointments and a political culture that transcends ethnic boundaries. 3. Indiscipline. The author laments a widespread lack of public discipline, from traffic violations to bribery, nepotism, and lawlessness. Achebe argues that indiscipline is tolerated and even rewarded in Nigerian society, creating a culture of impunity. He points out that leaders themselves often model this bad behavior, so it becomes embedded in public life. He believes that without a return to order, rule of law, and accountability, progress is impossible. 4. Corruption. Achebe devotes a chapter to the deeply rooted corruption in public life, which he sees as one of Nigeria's greatest obstacles. He argues that corruption is not just about stealing public funds, but about undermining moral standards, distorting systems, and eroding public trust. He notes that while corruption exists in every society, in Nigeria it has become a way of life, so normalized that it no longer shocks. Achebe insists that corruption must be confronted at the highest levels, beginning with leaders who set the moral tone. 5. False image of ourselves. Achebe warns that many Nigerians have an inflated or false sense of national greatness. He criticizes empty slogans like, "Giant of Africa," which are not matched by real achievements. This national self-deception, he argues, allows mediocrity and complacency to thrive. Achebe calls for a more honest self-assessment and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths in order to improve. 6. Social injustice and inequality. Achebe is concerned about the wide gap between the rich and poor, which he views as socially dangerous and morally unacceptable. He criticizes a system where a few elites enrich themselves while the majority suffer, and he calls for policies that promote fairness and opportunity. He argues that leaders should identify with the poor, not isolate themselves in luxury and privilege. Without social justice, he warns, national cohesion and peace are at risk. 7. Mediocrity. Achebe condemns the celebration of mediocrity in public life, where loyalty or connections matter more than competence. He insists that Nigeria must reward excellence, particularly in leadership, education, and governance. He believes that a nation that tolerates mediocrity cannot make meaningful progress and urges a renewed focus on quality, merit, and performance. 8. Indigenization and national identity. Achebe reflects on the challenges of building a national identity after colonial rule. He argues that true independence requires more than political sovereignty, it requires a cultural, moral, and intellectual renewal. He supports indigenization, but warns that it must go beyond mere slogans or policies. It should involve reclaiming African values and developing institutions that serve the people, not replicate colonial models. 9. The role of the intellectual. Achebe calls on Nigeria's intellectuals, artists, and thinkers to speak truth to power and help shape national consciousness. He believes the writer and scholar have a role in confronting injustice, preserving memory, and imagining new possibilities. He sees silence or neutrality in times of crisis as a betrayal, and he urges public figures to engage politically and morally with society's problems. 10. Hope for the future. Despite his critiques, Achebe ends the book with a note of cautious optimism. He believes that Nigeria can change, if its people demand better leadership and commit to the values of honesty, justice, and civic responsibility. He affirms the importance of active citizenship, not just reliance on leaders. Change must come from both above and below, from a society that refuses to accept corruption and failure as normal. Themes and analysis. 1. Leadership and moral responsibility. The dominant theme is leadership as the cornerstone of national development. Achebe insists that no amount of resources or talent can compensate for bad leadership. He defines good leadership in moral terms, based on vision, integrity, courage, and service. 2. National identity and unity. Achebe grapples with Nigeria's fragile national identity, fractured by ethnic, religious, and regional loyalties. He argues that a true nation must be built on shared values, not just geography. He calls for inclusive governance, meritocracy, and a redefinition of patriotism, one that is critical, not blind. 3. Civic responsibility. Achebe emphasizes that the people also bear responsibility for the nation's fate. Citizens must demand accountability, reject mediocrity, and refuse to follow corrupt leaders. He promotes an active, engaged citizenry, echoing his belief that writers and intellectuals must not be neutral in times of moral crisis. 4. Cultural self-deception and honesty. The book challenges empty national pride and denial of problems. Achebe believes that honest self-critique is necessary for reform. He rejects slogans and myths in favor of realism, reflection, and hard truths.